Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We are starting our Big Ten football predictions today, and our first team just barely missed out on the college football playoff despite winning their conference championship, but look poised to make another playoff run. They are the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State had just 2 losses in the regular season, but one of them proved very costly. They lost to Oklahoma in just the second week of the season, which was excusable because the Sooners had Baker Mayfield and were number 5 in the nation, so that was understandable. But then they lost to Iowa late in the season on the road, 55-24, and that was the game that I think everybody else thinks was what kept Ohio State out of the college football playoff. Ohio State, that was their lone Big Ten loss of the year, still made the Big Ten championship and won that game over an undefeated Wisconsin, and yet were left out of the playoff. Alabama getting a slight edge over the Buckeyes despite not even playing in their conference championship game. So there was some controversy there among the playoff committee and seeing who got in, but Ohio State ended up getting their revenge, winning the Cotton Bowl over USC in pretty dominating fashion. And this year, with a bit of a chip on their shoulder, looking to get back to the college football playoff and certainly have the team to do it. They returned 12 starters, 7 on offense and 5 on defense. And they lost JT Barrett, one of the better quarterbacks in Ohio State history, I think. They get Dwayne Haskins in at quarterback, who played a little bit in that Michigan game when Barrett was out with injury and actually showed some flashes of brilliance. Joe Burrow, who we thought might be competing for it, left, transferred to LSU, where he will be playing this year. They have their running back with JK Dobbins and experienced wide receivers in Austin Mack and Paris Campbell. So they're going to be very set on that offensive side of the ball. Despite Barrett leaving, despite having some transfers, I think they're going to be just fine there. The defense, 5 returning starters there, and their defensive line and secondary is going to be fairly solid. Defensive line, as we all know, led by Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa's brother there. That's obviously going to be a huge boost for this Ohio State defensive line. You got Draymond Jones there as well and Jordan Fuller in the secondary. So I've learned after watching football for so many years to never doubt Urban Meyer. So even when you think Ohio State might be down or any Urban Meyer team might be down, you might want to reconsider that because he's going to have his team ready to go. And Ohio State looks poised for another college football playoff run. They opened the season against Oregon State, which really shouldn't be another issue for them. It's a good Power 5 opponent playing in the Pac-12, but it's one of the weaker Power 5 opponents. They return 15 starters, and I do like their quarterback in Jake Luton, but they have a first-year head coach in Jonathan Smith after going just 1-11 last year. I don't see Oregon State coming in here and giving the Buckeyes much of a fight, so they're going to open the season 1-0. And then they play Rutgers in just the second week of the season. They had their first Big Ten opponent, and Rutgers is a team that should, in theory, improve this year. They have, I think, 15 returning starters as well, so they should be able to improve, I think, on that 4-8 mark that they had last year, maybe get to a bowl game in Chris Ash's 3rd year there, but they are more than likely going to start a freshman quarterback, and in just his second start, he's going to have to come into Ohio State. That's going to be a very tough environment for him. I don't see Rutgers getting to the point where they can compete at this type of level, and Ohio State get to win over the Scarlet Knights there. And then a very intriguing matchup here, one that isn't getting a whole lot of attention because we have so many big games in Week 1, but Week 3, Ohio State goes down to Arlington to face TCU, and TCU is a team that I'm not too high on this year, but a lot of people seem to be. I'm not too high on them. They lost some key defensive stars, lost a quarterback in Kenny Hill. They lost Kyle Hicks, their leading rusher from last year. They returned Sean Robinson, who was a solid backup for Kenny Hill last year. Kavonte Turpin at wide receiver has a lot of speed there. So TCU still has plenty of talent, and Gary Patterson, a heck of a head coach. I think it's going to be a heck of a game. But I just don't see TCU competing much in the Big 12 this year. I don't think they're going to make a return trip to the Big 12 championship. And I don't see them beating Ohio State here. And they might have a home field advantage because it is in the state of Texas, so it's closer for TCU than it's going to be for Ohio State. And they certainly have a strong secondary. I think the defense will be their strength there unless Sean Robinson and the TCU offense can surprise some people and start to click fairly quickly. But I just don't see TCU upsetting Ohio State in Arlington this year. I think it's going to be closer, about 3/4 of the game. It's certainly going to be a fun one to watch and a big resume booster for Ohio State to get back to the playoff. But I think they get a win over the Horned Frogs there, and then a win over Tulane at home, a bit of a tune-up before their first big Big Ten game of the year at Penn State. And, of course, 2 years ago, this was the game that I think really put Penn State back on the map. It was Ohio State's lone loss of the season. Penn State upsetting the Buckeyes in Happy Valley, and like I said, that was what put Penn State in the Rose Bowl. Ohio State, despite that loss, still made the college football playoff. It did not end well for them. But this is a game that could be potentially dangerous for the Buckeyes. With games against Penn State, at Purdue, at Michigan State, Michigan, I don't see Ohio State going undefeated this year. I think they're bound to lose to at least one of these teams, more than likely Penn State, Michigan State, or Michigan. The Nittany Lions returned 7 offensive starters, but only 3 on defense. And that's my biggest concern is their defense. I know that James Franklin He's going to have his team ready to go. He's going to have them hyped for this game. And the defense, 4 games in, should be a little more experienced and should be starting to gel a little quickly. And they also returned Trace McSorley, one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten this season. I know they lost Saquon Barkley. I know they lost Deshaun Hamilton. I know they lost some big-time starters on the offensive side of the ball as well. But they do return Juwan Johnson, the second leading receiver from last year, and DeAndre Tompkins at wide receiver as well. And 4 offensive linemen, so that's going to be huge for Penn State as well, giving McSorley some protection. I'm actually going to predict a loss here at Penn State for the Buckeyes. Now, like I said, I don't think the Buckeyes are going undefeated because they're facing the 3 toughest teams in the Big Ten, in my opinion. I know they're all in their division, but 2 of those are on the road, at Penn State, at Michigan State, and Michigan. And I think Penn State is such a difficult place to play. They're going to be hyped for this game. Penn State nearly beating Ohio State last year, blowing that huge lead, allowing Ohio State to come back there. I just think Penn State, a little revenge on their shoulder, a little chip on their shoulder, revenge on their mind, a solid quarterback, maybe more so than Ohio State. I think the Nittany Lions get a big-time win at home over the Buckeyes. Then they return home to face Indiana, a team that, once again, like Penn State, only returns 3 starters on defense, but Penn State's defense will by far be better than Indiana's, and overall better than Indiana. Just period. Indiana brings in Brandon Dawkins, the transfer quarterback from Arizona, so they have a little stability there. It's definitely going to help them getting a quarterback that had experience playing in a Power 5 environment. I just don't see Indiana coming in to Columbus and beating the Buckeyes there. They hung with them last year in the season opener. I just don't see it happen this year. Ohio State gets a win over the Hoosiers, and I think they get a win over Minnesota too, with 14 returning starters for the Golden Gophers. PJ Fleck, I think, is getting this Gophers team to compete in the Big Ten. I think he's going to get them to a bowl game this year, so they're slowly going to improve, but I'm a little concerned about the quarterback situation. I like Rodney Smith at running back. I like Tyler Johnson at wide receiver, and I love this Minnesota linebacking core. So maybe the defense can surprise us. Maybe they can shut down Ohio State's running game, make them win this game through the air, but in the end, I don't think it's going to be too much of a challenge. Ohio State gets a big-time win over Minnesota. And then on the road at Purdue, certainly not a team anyone can afford to sleep on after what they did last year, getting to a bowl game in Jeff Brom's first year there, beating Arizona and Khalil Tate in their bowl game to get the 7 wins, have a solid quarterback regardless of who it is, whether it's Elijah Sindelar or David Blow, so I like that. And their offense is going to be pretty potent this year. 9 returning stars on that side of the ball, but 4 on defense. And that defense is going to be pretty weak. Really is going to be the issue for this Boilermaker team, but it's later on in the season, so maybe they can fix some things up and give Ohio State a test. I just think the Buckeyes are going to be too much for the Purdue defense, and I think this Ohio State defense, despite only returning 5 starters, is still going to be very, very dominant, still very tough to go up against. I just don't see Purdue, despite it being at home, getting a win over the Buckeyes, so a win there. And then a bye week, only 1 loss there, so they're going to be, 7-1 coming into Nebraska. And Nebraska, a team that a lot of people are high on this year. Scott Frost leaving Central Florida to come back to his alma mater to take the head coaching job there. They are going to have a little bit of an inexperienced quarterback. I believe it's going to be Adrian Martinez, the freshman. So obviously not going to have a whole lot of experience there. But they do have a very experienced defense with 8 returning starters. And then one of the better wide receivers in the Big Ten is Stanley Morgan. So if Martinez can get some stuff going, especially this late in the season, maybe Nebraska will be solid. But one interesting fact, the past 2 years, and by far better Nebraska teams the past 2 years, at least in 2016, Ohio State has beaten Nebraska by a combined score of 118-17. So they've outscored Nebraska by 101 points the past 2 years. And I just don't see it, Nebraska coming into Ohio State, especially off of a bye week, and beating the Buckeyes. That would be a huge win for Scott Frost in his first year. I just don't see it happening, though. So a win for the Buckeyes there. And then the big-time stretch for Ohio State. They want to make the Big Ten championship and bolster that college football playoff resume. This is the stretch they're going to do it at Michigan State, who I really like this year, at Maryland, who's going to be okay, and then Michigan, obviously, in the game in the final week of the season. They start off with the Spartans, though, and Michigan State returns 19 starters, and I think they're going to be a pretty big threat in the Big Ten this year. Could potentially challenge Ohio State to get to the Big Ten championship game. They're going to be led by Brian Lewerke, the solid quarterback who showed improvement last year. L.J. Scott, a running back. Like I said, 19 starters overall. And 2 years ago, when Michigan State just went 3-9, they nearly beat Ohio State at home. They lost that game 17-16. So with it being on the road and Ohio State just annihilating Michigan State last year, Michigan State a little bit more revenge there, a more experienced team. I think this game is going to be very, very close, and to the point where I almost picked Michigan State to pull off the upset here. But I think in the end, just overall talent-wise and the offense of Ohio State is just going to be too much for Michigan State, despite it being on the road. I'm going to give them a narrow victory on the road against the Spartans, but it would not surprise me if if Michigan State were to upset Ohio State in this game. With it being at home and with the starters they return, as long as they stay healthy, Mark D'Antonio is going to have his team ready to go, and it would not surprise me if Michigan State can upset the Buckeyes here. And then they play Maryland. I really like Maryland's offense. They started 3-1 last year with the upset over Texas. So they looked they had a lot of promise, weren't able to get anything going there. Not going to be too much of a threat, almost a bit of a tune-up, I think, despite it being on the road in preparation for this Michigan game. And obviously, a big-time game coming here with Shea Patterson and 17 returning starters for the Wolverines. Michigan, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Shea Patterson, being able to throw to him, a dual-threat quarterback. They have Karan Higdon, they have Chris Evans. So this is a solid offense for the Wolverines. And on defense, a team that really only returned, I think, one starter from last year, but slowly progressed and got better. They returned 9 this year. So this is going to be a solid Michigan team. Many who think if Ohio State's not going to win the division, it's going to be Michigan. This game is at Ohio State, though. 2 years ago, the Instant Classic, that would have sent the winner more than likely to the college football playoff. Ohio State winning that game 30-27 in double overtime. If this game was in Ann Arbor, if this game was at Michigan, I'd be picking the Wolverines. But because it is at Ohio State, because of the scenario that we've got going here, because I think Ohio State, knowing they're 1 win away from the Big Ten championship and solidifying almost another spot in the college football playoff, I'm going to give them the win over Michigan in what should be a more intense game and a more competitive game than it was last year. Ohio State going on the road and winning that game 31-20. This is going to be another close game. I can see it being a lot like the game we just saw 2 years ago, number 2 and number 3 in the country. But Ohio State gets a win over Michigan, a Michigan team that's going to be very dangerous this year and will definitely compete in the Big Ten. So 11-1 for Ohio State on the 2018 season, which is not a bad year by any means. And like I said earlier, I do not see this Ohio State going undefeated. This isn't the best Ohio State team we've seen in recent years, but it's still another solid team, and Urban Meyer is going to have his team ready to go. But they're not going undefeated. They will lose to somebody, and that somebody I have as Penn State on the road, but it could be Michigan State or it could be Michigan. I think those are by far the 3 toughest teams that Ohio State will have to face this year. I think they lose to one of them, but no more than that. So I think Ohio State will be a 1-loss team, and right now I have them pegged to lose early on, which will be better than losing to Michigan State or Michigan late to Penn State in just the 5th week of the season. So a very respectable year for Ohio State. Should clinch another Big Ten championship berth and then potentially a college football playoff berth that they just missed out on last year. So another solid year for the Buckeyes. I cannot wait to see what they do this season. As always, please go check us out on Twitter at Gridiron Expert, on Instagram at The Gridiron Expert, and always here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.